Hi, I'm Amy. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by one of my favourite YA authors, Sue WALLMAN. I think Sue was probably one of the first YA authors I read, and she's written so many amazing YA books. So today we're here to talk about Such a Good Liar, but I'm also going to try and get the secrets from Sue about how you can write so many amazing YA books. I think, is it book a year that you write, Sue?
Yes, it sort of slowed down a little bit in COVID because there were books that are stacked up waiting to be published. So that's why I know you did, it came out a little bit later, but yes, it is a bit of a 1 year thing, which is quite hard.
It is amazing. Well, hopefully we can get some of those secrets why you did that. So thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about your latest book, which comes out in May, and it's called Such a Good Liar?
Yes, so Such a Good Liar is my sixth thriller, and it is about a girl called Shannon Jones, and she assumes someone else's identity and goes to an island for revenge. That's kind of like the elevator pitch. And so she's got revenge in her heart, and she is after two sisters on this island, and it's the story of her revenge, really. Yes, but the sort of central thing really is about her being a fraud and how she gets away with it and what she has to do and how it impacts everything, really.
That sounds so fun. I like the fact that with your main characters, they're very different. I think I know you did it as the most recent of your books I've read, and obviously the one that came out the most recently. And that main character, I think, has her demons that she's battling with and has done things in the past that she can't do anything about now. Do you find that you consciously go out of your way to write different characters, or is that something that has just kind of happened as you've gone along through your career?
Well, I like that you think they're different, because with my second book, I was in a right panic and I said to my editor, it feels like I'm writing the same character again. And they said, no, don't worry. There's enough difference with that character. And I think because quite a lot comes from you. I mean, obviously the characters aren't me, but there's a lot of yourself in the character, isn't there, that you bring to it. And no, I just think when you get a mix of flaws and their passions and their motivations, then they become different people. And I can see that now. And I'm not so worried about writing the same character over and over again. So yes, I particularly enjoyed writing the character of Shannon Jones. I mean, I call her Shannon throughout the book, but most of the time people think she's Lydia Cornwallis. So that was a bit of a challenge, really. There were lots of challenges in that book, and there's obviously challenges in every book you write. But my main challenge with this was how to make her likable, because she's actually gone to this island to kill them, basically. So it's like, how do you make her sympathetic? How do you kind of get readers on side? And the main thing I had to do, I realized, was to make all the other characters even more vile and also to give her good motivation for why she's doing what she's doing, and that's around her mum, and what happened to her mum the summer before.
I'm so excited about it. This copy arrived, I think, 2 days ago, and I've been absolutely itching to start reading it since then. So I think as soon as we're finished, I'm going to have to go and read it now. I've heard that. So do you tend to start then with your plot or your characters? Because I feel like your books feel to me as a reader quite equally weighted, like they're very fast-paced and plot-driven, but I think that you really unpick the layers of your characters as well. Do you tend to start with one or the other?
Well, I think when you're writing thriller, you have to start with a plot, because if you don't have a plot, then the whole thing is just a complete mess. And I've learned that the hard way, because I tried for a long time to get published and I was just focusing too much on character and not about what was happening in the story. So yes, the plot does come first in terms of what I want to write about, and I always have the ending as well, because I have to work towards the ending. I think I could probably write it without knowing what was going to be the ending, but I think it would take me longer to get there, and I think I'd just go down too many blind alleys, whereas if I know exactly where I'm headed, then it's slightly more of a direct route. So yes. Can't remember the question. What was the main question?
I think you totally did it like plot.
Oh yeah, the plot
first.
Yes, so the plot comes first, and then the characters. Yeah, definitely. I'm really invested in the characters, and I spend a lot of time thinking about that character. And I never get the character, or I never feel as if I get the character straight off in the first draft. It's always a layering and a sort of chipping away at who they are, and then by the end, I usually know them absolutely inside out, and I love that sort of feeling of you've kind of nailed your character, but it takes a long time.
Yeah, and I think character is something that you can layer in later, and you can even be adding little touches right through your edits. But I think if you've not got the plot right in a mystery, particularly if it's a crime and you know that somebody's going to be guilty of it, you can't possibly plot all the threads in that you need if you don't know who did it. And yeah, like you said, I learned that the hard way, because in book 2, it took me quite a while to figure out who I wanted the villain to be. And I was just floundering until I got the ending of the book. Like you said, I couldn't work out the middle. The beginning, I think, is always fine. But I think as soon as I get to the middle and realize that it's turning into a mushy mess, that's when I know that the ending needs work before you can actually write the exciting stuff that gets you there.
Yeah, I think the middle is always problematic. Definitely for me, and particularly in this book, it was problematic because not enough was happening in the middle, and I just felt, I needed help, and at that point I did ask for help, and my editor came up with what had to be done, and there's a really dramatic bit in the middle, which helped enormously. And yeah, I mean, hopefully I would have got to that by myself, but when you're writing a book within a year, you do need to kind of ask for help relatively quickly if things are sort of going pear-shaped.
Yeah, you don't have the breathing room. You can't sit on it and think, right, I'm gonna have 3 or 4 months just to let this stew in my mind. Like, I think my first idea for Mina was in 2012 when I went on holiday, and then I wrote it in 2016. So that's been stewing in my mind for quite a long time. And I did realize writing book 2 that I think I relied on people quite a bit more, like asking them questions of, well, what would you think if this happened? Can you read this scene and tell me what you think? And I think you do need, for me anyway, and it sounds like for you as well, having an extra pair of really trusted eyes to look at it. It can just give you another perspective. And sometimes you don't need them to tell you the answer. You need to talk it through, and suddenly you realize you can get there yourself.
Yeah, that's one thing I've really learned, is that, the power of collaboration. And it's partly to do with writing relatively quickly, but it's part of understanding that people can bring such brilliant ideas into it, just by chewing over one little thing. They might say something that triggers something else. I mean, you know what it's like, and I think that writers can't really write in isolation. They have to sort of be drawing from all sorts of places and other people.
Yeah, like you said as well, that your main character, if it's got elements that are close to you, bringing in other people's characters and perspectives can only help and to make it stronger. And I think for me, the hardest thing with a mystery is second guessing myself and thinking, is this going to be obvious to the reader? Is this going to be come around, the other side of it and be so out of there that they're going to feel cheated when I do that at the end? Is that something, do you find yourself second guessing when you're writing the mystery elements of it?
Yes, and I think what I have to do is make sure that all my characters have motivations. So and also they have to have motivations that perhaps aren't in my other books as well. You can't just be repeating why someone might be doing something. So yes, I'm all the time thinking, how could this character be shady? What could they be hiding? And yeah, just that doesn't always happen in the first draft or even the second draft. I'm always kind of adding bits, going back and strengthening these sort of red herring bits.
Yeah, I said that to Sue before we started. For people who didn't get to see the kind of pre-chat, I think that in your books, it's amazing how, like you said, I question all of the characters at different points, and you even wonder about the main character's motivations. I think that that's always really, really well done in your books. And in fact, when I was reading, I know you did it, I was plotting and still plotting elements of my book and thinking, oh, how can I do it like Sue? I really need to learn this. So one thing I am wondering, and I'm hoping that I can glean from you, because I'm obviously just finished my second book and I'm starting to work on my third. How do you keep track of them? Do you have to consciously go back through what you've written before to keep it fresh and different? Like, do you have any advice in that regard?
What, keeping track of what, the plots or the characters?
Yeah, so how do you make sure that you don't write 40,000 words and realize you've already written that book? Like, how do you make it feel like it's still you, but you are going to make it different, like, with it each time you write? Because I think your books, you could pick one up and know it's a Sue WALLMAN book, but it's different from what you've written before as well. Like, how do you do anything conscious to make sure that happens?
That's a really interesting question, because I hadn't really thought about that before. But so the first 2 books, when I got my deal, I had a 2-book deal. So I'd already written the first one, and the second one was very, much in my head, and I knew what I was going to do. And then after that, the books have always been written after a chat with my editor, who is amazing. He's called Linus Alcenas, and he gets very excited about the idea, and we sort of talk it through. And I think that's what makes me feel like they're all different, because we hammer out so many ways that it could go, that I can sort of see a way that it would be fun and different. And that's the other thing about writing genre fiction, to make it exciting for yourself and different. You know, you want to sort of give yourself different challenges. So the challenge for I Know You Did It was, this might be a bit of a spoiler, but hopefully not, there's a double twist in it that was quite hard to pull off. And I think the challenge with my latest book, Such a Good Liar, is how do I keep readers on side with this character who is problematic. So that was my challenge. And then the ending, how to make the ending satisfying. Well, that's always the challenge, isn't it? How to make your ending satisfying, because if the ending is rubbish, then people think the whole book is rubbish. Whether, you know, you've written brilliant characters and, you know, everything's fallen into place, if the ending doesn't work, then, you know, you can forget it. So I think that's how they're different. It's just that initial chat and sort of touching base with my editor, just to be sure, I think is the answer.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you said about challenging yourself as an author and giving yourself new fun things to work on. It also is a way to make the book different. So if I said to you, like, tell me the plot of like Lying About Last Summer, can you remember your past books that you've written? Or do you find that once you've written them, do you sort of put them to one side and move on?
I have an absolute fear of being asked about about previous books or characters, and you know, thinking, oh, you know, I can't even remember, you know, my protagonist's name. And yes, I mean, Lying About Last Summer is seared into my brain, because, you know, I wanted it so badly, and you know, that book got rewritten so many times, and you know, it was just such an amazing thing for me to get published, and so on. And then probably, yeah, and then, yeah, the subsequent books, I mean, there's things I love about them too. See How They Lie is probably my favorite, because my characters there, I just often think about them, May and Noah, and you know, wonder how they're doing. But then equally, you know, Such a Good Liar, I just, you know, wish good things for Shannon Jones now. It's so weird, isn't it? You know, they're sort of in your head, but they recede. But yeah, they are still there. But it's when you're asked specific questions about them that I kind of panic, basically. And that could just be lack of experience in sort of chatting generally about my books, possibly.
I don't think it's just you. I know I'm a big James Masters fan, in case you can't tell from all the spike stuff behind me. And I remember I went to see him interviewed in real life, and people kept asking him stuff like, what's your favourite line that you said? And can you sing your whole song from the musical episode? And he's like, no, and I can't remember. And he had a go at singing it, and he couldn't remember any of the words, and it was brilliant. And everybody kind of sang it at him, and we all knew them all. But I think to some extent, when you're, obviously he's performing material, but you're creating material, I think it's really hard to kind of keep hold of all that in your head. Like, I've only written 2 books, and I found myself having to flick back through book 1 when I was writing stuff in book 2, like, oh gosh, what colour that character's eyes? It was as simple as that too. Like, then there were certain expressions that I had characters say. I was like, I need to make sure that what Libby says all the time in book 1, it doesn't become Mina's expression in book 2. Yeah, I don't know. So all of your books have been standalones, haven't they?
They have, yes. And yeah, I've never been asked to do anything different. And I think probably from a publishing point of view, it's less risky, isn't it, a standalone? Because we've all heard those tales of, you know, series where the first book hasn't done well, which means it's, you know, kiss of death for the rest.
Yeah, and I think even series where the first book's done really well, I've heard that gradually you tend to get a drop off in sales as well, just because I can think of probably 10 series that I've really enjoyed, and I've picked the first book up, and for whatever reason I've not ended up getting to the second one, just because there's that many things to read, aren't there? So
yes, you move on, don't you?
Yeah, I can only hope that Mina readers will still want to know what's going to happen to these characters. And I think there are some of the skill sets the same, aren't there, for writing a standalone mystery or thriller to a series one. It's just a series one's a bit of a longer game. Like, you've got to have a satisfying ending still for one book, but you kind of keep it going. But it's interesting that you said you think about your characters. Somebody asked me recently about whether I can't remember exactly the question, but it was something like, would I ever put Mina like you know, her life at risk, and like, could anything really genuinely bad happen to her? And I was like, no, like I really wouldn't want to like leave her with like, I mean, I'm sure that the things have happened would probably be quite traumatic outside of the world of, you know, the vampire fiction, but I do feel quite protective of the main characters. And when there's particular characters in book one that I did really bad things, and I actually felt like it kind of hurt me to do them, but I just felt it was necessary to make an interesting book. Everything can't be kind of happy and easy for the characters all the time. Do you feel like that sometimes? Has there been anything you've done to a character and you've thought, oh, I feel really bad?
Yeah, all the time I'm being pushed to do worse things to them during the editing process. And well, this is a massive spoiler for Your Turn to Die, but you know, I had to kill the dog. And I get students saying, look, you know, why did you do that? And I say, it's not my fault, I was told to do it. I think it's really painful to do bad stuff to your characters. And, you know, I did love that dog. And I think for you, writing a second book with the same characters means they're even more, you know, in your head, aren't they? And you've lived even longer with them. And so
it's difficult, and you've got to feel like they're in genuine peril, but at the same time, like mine's a first person book, so you know, spoiler alert, Mina is going to get to the end of the series in one piece. But it's just thinking about the fact that just because I really like a character doesn't mean that they can survive. You know, I'm hoping that there'll be 3 books. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can survive all the way to the end. And there were characters that didn't make it at the end of book 1, and I kind of wanted them in book 2, but you need to show, don't you, that the villains mean business, and that if they're a murderer, they actually need to do some murdering.
Yes, you absolutely do need that peril there. Otherwise, I mean, we think we don't want it, but we absolutely do as humans, don't we? We want to kind of live vicariously.
Yeah, and when you see like TV shows that have gone on, and like say the main characters don't get together, and you spend every episode wishing that they will, but then you know that when they get together, like it's going to be the end. So I think there is a lot of, it's sort of delayed gratification, isn't it, in that sense?
Definitely, and with romance, definitely,
Right, I'm just gonna have to consult the questions. I feel like I've taken you off on some wonderful tangents, but I'm wondering if there's anything else. Oh, so I wanted to ask you as well, on the subject of writing so many books and trying to keep them straight in your mind, do you think that there are common threads through your books, even though you're writing distinct works? Is there anything that sort of themes that recur or ideas that you keep coming back to?
Again, that's an interesting question. I know that people talk about my claustrophobic settings, and I don't know why. I started with that claustrophobic setting in Lying About last summer, and actually from a thriller point of view, I mean, lots of people use claustrophobic settings. And basically you can make anywhere claustrophobic if you try hard enough. I don't know. I love writing the little details. You know, those relatable little authentic details is kind of the bit I really love about writing. I mean, I find plot really hard. I don't know. I don't know if I'm the right person to sort of talk about sort of the commonalities in my books, really.
Well, it's interesting because I bet some authors very deliberately will build that into their worlds. Like when I think of people like Sarah Dessen, she intentionally, although a lot of her books, I don't know whether all of her books are standalones, but she has common elements. So things like a band that they are the main characters in one book, in the next book, like they'll go to see that band. And I find that quite interesting that you can deliberately do that. I just wondered whether, I know that you probably hadn't built those things in, because I'd certainly not picked them up, but I just wondered if there were any common themes that you realised had come out, or whether you'd deliberately done it. But I think there's no right way, is there, that everybody approaches it differently?
Yeah, I mean, with thrillers, you're always going to write about murder, secrets and lies, aren't you? So that's all got to be in there. And, you know, people being things that, you know, just people being sketchy, basically, isn't it? You know, is kind of what I'm doing.
Yeah, they have to be. Otherwise, I suppose it'd be really clear who we were looking for from the very beginning. I think every character in a thriller has got to have some secret or darkness to them. I think that's why I like them. I like trying to, I think I'm like that in real life. I like trying to peel back layers of people. Not necessarily figure out who's evil or murderous, but, you know, just trying to work out what makes people tick. Maybe that's why I wanted to be an author. I think I love trying to make characters seem real and thinking about what are their vulnerabilities, what are their strengths, and how is that going to impact on the plot. I really like that. I think that's why I really like Libby, although she's not very much like me as a character. She's quite kind of standoffish and abrupt, and she'd rather brush things kind of underneath. Whereas I think with me, I'm probably more like Mina, where things would start to fester if I didn't face up to them. But yeah, I just really like that. I like the fact that you can write people that are like you, like Mina probably is. I don't know what I'll do when I'm not writing a main character who's not like me. But yeah, do you find that, are there any of your main characters where you got to the end and you thought, oh yeah, that one's me? Or do you think that there's just bits of you in all of them?
I think it's just bits of me. I mean, growing up, my family was always very aware about human behavior because my dad is a psychiatrist.
Oh, right.
Retired now, but so it was always kind of, why are people doing that, sort of, the whole thing around why people do what they do is fascinating. And I think I have sympathy for all my main characters, and what was interesting in writing Such a Good Liar is that she is essentially a villain, and I know I keep saying this, but it's like how to make her likable, how to make people relate to her. And
so
I just find it challenging.
Is she not the most like you then, Sue, out of all the characters?
No, that's yes, well observed. I would say she's the least like me, and I certainly wouldn't be as ballsy as her. And I hopefully wouldn't go after revenge in the same way,
No. But that's why she's the main character of a thriller, and you're kind of safely working in a library and writing books.
Exactly. That's yes, but that doesn't mean I don't have dark thoughts about people.
That's true.
Yeah.
You just don't go to a murderous island and
exactly. I just
on them.
Head, yeah.
Yeah, I think Mina is probably a slightly more extreme version of me. Like, she does really stupid things that I wouldn't have done in fact, as a teenager, I think I was even more risk averse than I am now. I think I'm probably slightly more willing to plunge into things now than I would have been then. I think I've written other characters. Something else that I'm writing that is nowhere near ready for publication is a main character who is very much not like me. She's quite prickly and secretive, and I think that's interesting too, because I'm having to really plunge to different depths of, I'm not drawing on like with Mina. I kind of think, well, what was I like in the 90s when the book's set? What was popular in the 90s? And it's just drawing on my own teenage years. I think that having to find different traits that you can't relate to can be really fun, but really difficult.
It's just about putting yourself in their shoes, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you have one book that you have found the most difficult out of all the ones you've written, or do you think each one's just had its own challenges?
Yeah, I think each book is different in its own way, and you start off thinking, right, here we go, and then it's, oh gosh, right, this is the moment at which I think I'm not going to be able to do it, and it sort of happens at different points with different books.
I think people say to me as well at different points, like, oh, so what's your favorite part of the process? And whatever part of the process I'm not working on is my favorite. So thinking of the idea is definitely my favorite when I'm actually drafting. And then when I'm drafting, editing must be the best bit that they actually enjoy. But I think just being finished is probably the bit I enjoy, like holding a book in my hands. And even then you have that doubt of, it is not once it's a book, it's this unchangeable thing. And I think it was in a Laini Taylor interview that she said, when you've written a book, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to readers, and it's for them to do with what they want. And I think that's quite scary. So really, I think there's great things about each part of the process, but each part is difficult in its way. Do you have a preferred part, or like me, is it just whichever thing you're not doing at that point?
I totally relate to what you've just said. Yes. I think writing the first draft is the hardest, because that's when it feels very ropey, and you're worried that if anybody ever read it, they would just think that you can't do it anymore. I like those moments when you're editing where you just link things up and you think, whoa, this is really going to work, and it just sort of happens because you've sown the seeds. I love that. Sort of the final polishing. I do like a bit of polishing.
Yeah, because it feels like, for me anyway, that the bulk of the work is done at that point. And unless you spot something at a later stage that you've got to unpick, I think by then that the plot's pretty solid, the characters are who you want them to be, and you just need to tidy things up. I think that feels really good, doesn't it, when you're going through and you've got comments on the document and track changes that you need to fix, and slowly you just tick them off. And
and
I can actually do this.
Occasionally you'll think, whoa, that was good, that line, really like that.
That's usually the line though. For me, my agent will go, no, cut it. I'm like, oh good, that was my favorite one.
It's irrelevant, get rid of it. Yeah,
and it's interesting that, do you is there anything in your books that you have ever loved and kind of had to cut, or is there anything you've fought for? Because I think I've had both. The stuff that I've like begrudgingly cut because it's like, okay, you're right, and then there's things that like in my first book, my agent had said, do you actually need diary entries in it? Like, I don't think they were diary entries actually. I think they were just alternating viewpoints at that point. She's like, do you need them? Can they just go? I was like, no, they can't go so quick, make them good. And that's when they became diary entries, and I really fought for them. And I think that they really improved the book. But yeah, do you feel that there's anything that have you ever had to let go of anything, or anything that you've had to fight for in your books?
I can't think of anything straight away, but there's been things we've done back and forth on track changes about, rewriting something. There was something, certain things saying, I know you did it, around school. Like the CCTV is quite important in that plot. And the editor said to me, I don't think this is very realistic that a CCTV wouldn't be working. And I just thought, I absolutely know through working in a school that this is highly credible, because, CCTV cameras often don't work, the systems are very expensive. So I was able to fight that one really easily. So I guess
it's tricky,
yes.
Isn't it? Because that a reader might read that and think, oh, completely unbelievable. And in your heart that actually that's, believable. I have that same problem with police procedure. I think I keep saying to myself, I'm not going to have so many police in it. It's really hard to pull off. And then I did the exact same thing in the second book, putting loads of police procedure in it. And I think it's a weighing up, all with stuff like that. You needed that to happen to serve your plot. And I need to have certain things happen with the police. Like I can't have DNA evidence take like 3 weeks or whatever they would have done in the 90s. It needs to just happen. So I think sometimes you kind of stretch that credibility, don't you? But it is frustrating when actually that, yes, that could happen.
But yeah, definitely. That stuff gets cut all the time. I think in one of my books, a whole chapter went that they said wasn't moving the plot forward. I thought, oh, okay then. But you know that when you're being edited, that everybody wants the same thing, don't they? We all want that book to sell. And so I usually think, well, they're the professionals. I mean, 9 times out of 10 I would think that.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many people involved on the process, aren't there, that you do get to a point where it's like, well, actually I had that little inkling and then my editor said the same thing. So if you start to see a pattern in advice you're getting, I think it's always worth doing. If a couple of people have told you the pace is dragging, then it possibly is. But then I suppose feedback can go totally opposite directions, can't it? You'll have somebody read it and say, I love romance, more romance. And then the next review will say, hate romance, none of it, please. So I think you've kind of got to trust your editors and trust your own gut, haven't you, in a lot of it?
Absolutely. The hardest thing I find is if someone in the publishers reads it right at the very end of the process and they think, oh, I think it would work even better if you just added a little bit of this. And I think, whoa, I'm scared that's, I won't put it in properly and then it'll only have one read afterwards. And it's always those last minute changes. And I used to work as a magazine journalist, and it was always those last minute things that we put in that, had typos or didn't make sense, or, you got someone's telephone number wrong, or I'm very wary of stuff happening at the end.
Yeah, I think with my first book, I didn't really understand. I sort of knew in theory what the process would look like, but there was stuff that took me by surprise. It's like, oh, we'll get proofread at this point, so people have read the proof copies, and a proofreader hasn't seen it. And I think knowing the second book, I knew like, okay, so this editor will do this job, and this person will do this job. I think that now I understand that there are structural edits, and then there are more fine detailed edits, and then there's a proofread. I think that I feel more comfortable now that I've got it right. I think last time I was thinking, oh, I can keep cramming stuff in right till the end. But now, like you said, I've learned that maybe can cause hiccups and just you don't want to introduce structural errors. And I think typos, I'm sure lots of books have typos in, but
typos was kind of the wrong thing. I suppose I meant inconsistencies more. Yeah.
But I mean, to be honest, I sort of proofread as part of my job, so even typos I'd prefer if there weren't any. But I know there was a typo in the first Prynne run of Mina 1. I think there was one extra at or something, and when I saw it I was just like, oh, I've checked this so many times. So it does happen. But
it's so weird, isn't it, when you have people, lots of people reading the same thing and you all miss things. And
it's lucky that there's so many of us in the process, isn't it, that hopefully we try and catch as many of these things as we can. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. So I'm going to ask you, are there any books that you would recommend then? So obviously your books are very thrilling and character and plot driven. Are there any books that you'd recommend by other authors that have that similar feel?
Oh, Well, one of my favorite YA books is We Were Liars, as I know it's lots of people's favorite book. It's just that sort of mix of simplicity, really engaging characters, and that plot twist that I didn't see coming. I love a plot twist I don't see coming. But the more you read thrillers and so on, the more you get used to plot twists, don't you?
I think if you become familiar with an author as well, I read Lucy Foley's first two adult books really close to each other. And by the end of the second one, I was like, oh, I get the pattern of what she does. But then I read The Paris Apartment recently, and I think that she went in a different direction. It's like, oh, this is great. I love it. An author that can kind of reinvigorate me and think, like, I just didn't know what she was going to go with that one. Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, it's a long time since I read We Were Liars. I think I probably need to read it again, because I remember feeling really shocked when I read that book right at the end.
Yeah, I just like really simple writing that packs a really good punch, and you just kind of reread a line. And I remember being sort of bowled over by Meg Rossoff's, what's it called?
Is it How I Live Now?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, even the title's good, isn't it? And yeah, so you don't really know how to describe that book. That's kind of genre busting, isn't it, really, that book? But I love that strong voice, really. So I'm not very good at recommendations the same as my books. I don't know.
What do you tend to find your teens are coming into the library and asking for at the moment? Is there anything that you can
well, they'd all be wanting Karen McManus and Holly Jackson, and some of the year sevens would love Robin Stevens. But yeah, I mean, we just obviously have a huge range of different, hopefully up-to-date appealing books. It's really important that they can just sort of see lots of books that are current, and there are so many brilliant books out there at the moment, aren't there?
Yeah,
Ace of Spades is a very popular book in our library at the moment. I haven't read that. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with libraries, isn't it? That it's access to books for everyone, and you want to give those kids who, if that's the only place they're getting books, you want to make sure that they're getting really current books that reflect the world and that reflect what they want. I bet that's a real challenge to kind of keep it stocked and keep it current.
Absolutely. And sort of find ways to suck them into reading as well. Reading for pleasure is such a big thing,
It is. I feel like we could do a whole event on this at some point.
Yeah,
I used to be a teacher, and
we've said this before, haven't we? That genre fiction is sometimes looked down on, but absolutely vital in school libraries. To get kids into reading, and not just to sort of move through it either. If that's all you want to read, that's fine. If it brings you pleasure, then that's great for your mental health and your vocab. And I think there's a lot of snobbery around reading, really.
There is, and I think that I read for different reasons and in different moods. And if I'm in the mood I'm in at the moment, which is mostly tired and after a day running around after a toddler, doing a day job, and maybe doing some writing as well, I just want to read something that I can digest easily and has short chapters. So I'm just not reading the fantasy and stuff that I used to, because I can't keep track of it. And if I'm reading a fantasy book when I'm tired, I can't follow all the intricacies of the world. So I think that at different points in your life and in different times of the year, you might want to read totally different things, and that's fine. I mean, I had a lot of it tended to be the boys actually, who'd read things like Beast Quest and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and their parents would be worried. And I was like, you're worried that they're reading? No, don't worry about that. Worry if they're not reading, that might impact on their progress and their learning. But if they're reading engaging books that they can't get enough of and they just want the next one, I think that that's to be celebrated.
Yes, I agree. And lots of students, I think, read for, as you say, different reasons. Because I remember a student who was finding GCSEs very hard, and he'd come into the library and read The Recruit by Robert Muchmore just over and over again. And, that's just kind of what made him feel, calm before an exam. And I learned a lot from him, really, that, about reading for different reasons.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know whether you're the same as me, but there's certain books like The Beach that's just behind me. I think I've probably read that book maybe 20 times, and I know that I'll read it again and again. And at this point, I'm not even sure whether I love it because it's great or whether I just love it because it's comforting and I know what's to come, and I know that character's so inside and out, and he's totally different from me, the main character. I hope he is anyway. But I love it. Are you a repeat reader, or do you tend to read once and then move on?
I think because I feel like there's so much to read, there's so much to read for work, and there's, I get sent books to read, and there's books that, people recommend. Yeah, I just don't repeat read. But, maybe in the future I'll do a bit more of it. But yes.
It does have a different feel, I think, when you've read a book before. There's some sort of, if it's a book you really enjoyed and got something out of the first time, I think there's a certain comfort in it. But yeah, then there is the panicked feeling of, I'm reading this one book and there's these 30 others calling my name from the shelves behind me.
Yes, I do like your shelves, Amy.
Thank you.
They are so, I can't stop looking at them actually.
Yeah, they need, I mean, every now and again they need a bit of tidying. Like the bottom shelves that you can't see are a complete disaster, and the floor is absolutely covered in junk. I'm currently trying to sort it because I've got probably 100 books that aren't on the shelves, and I'd like them to fit somehow, but I think I'm gonna have to do a massive cull at some point. But
yeah,
but thank you. It looks good, at least shoulder upwards. I think
it does. And you're doing what librarians call dynamic shelving, which is like some facing outwards and some, some of, going like that.
It's nice to be called dynamic. I don't feel very dynamic most days. That's quite good to know that my shelves are doing it, if not me.
Yeah, I came across that term quite recently, so yeah, I'm just slipping it in.
I do. I'll remember that from future videos. Oh, thank you so much, Sue. I've just got one more question to ask. Can you tell us anything about what you are working on now or planning to work on next?
Well, I'm hoping I will write another YA thriller, but I sort of know roughly what I'm going to write, but I haven't got a deal. I haven't had that conversation with the editor yet, but hopefully that will go ahead. And then just as a sort of little project, I've been writing a book with my partner, who I've been with for 18 months or so. And so we're writing a crime novel together, and we're writing every other chapter. And so that's been really fun, and a little dicey at times because, we're like editing each other's chapters. But he works in IT, so he's written a non-fiction book. He's not written fiction before. So yeah, I'm kind of learning a lot about, editing and
I bet writing with somebody. I've got a friend that I'm hoping to write a book with in the next couple of years, and we've started plotting it out together, and it's so interesting how bouncing ideas off somebody can just snowball them so quickly. And I'm really excited about writing this book now, just because it's like, oh, I could do this or this or this, and you're just pooling two people's passion and two people's exciting ideas. I think can be great. Also, like you said, you could end up falling out by the end of it.
But yeah, definitely. There's a lot of potential for that. So are you going to write every other chapter?
I think so, yeah. Two different characters, very different characters. And yeah, we're still kind of figuring it out, but I think it could be really exciting. And we're quite different as authors as well. And our backgrounds are different in that. So yeah, I think I'm trying not to say too much because I don't want to accidentally spoil something that doesn't even have a deal yet. But yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, mine's just a project, but we're doing it seriously. I think if you do a project like that, you should really sort of embrace it and try and make it absolutely as the best you can.
Yeah, I think that's the only way I've been able to write any of my books or anything, to be honest, because I think there's so much room for procrastination when you're being creative. It's like I could actually edit this book forever and let nobody read it. You've got to give yourself. I have to be quite structured, and I'm writing 1,000 words a day, or I'm editing so many chapters a day, or at the moment it's things like sorting out proof lists and stuff like that. I've always got to have a plan and know what I'm doing because I've got so little time. I think somebody said to me recently that time poor people tend to be really good with their time, and that's what I try and do. If I've only got an hour or two a day to do my writing job, I need to kind of make it count.
I think that's really true. My agent says that a lot. She says people who have other jobs tend to be much more productive writers. For all the reasons you've just said. Yeah, and that gives me comfort, really.
Oh, that's maybe a nice point to end, that if people like me and Sue who have jobs and, in my case, toddlers, and in Sue's case, extra books on the side, can write books, then, I think it's something that if you want to do it, it's definitely worth giving it a go. And there's lots of routes into that. Thank you so much, Sue. I knew I'd love talking to you. It's so amazing. I have to take a moment when I'm talking to people like you and think it's actually happening. Like I'm talking to some of these books I've been reading for years and years. And now we've actually kind of had a conversation as authors.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. I did go and see Sue. I mentioned Sue beforehand as an author. I sat there as a blogger in the audience. So it's nice to be an author now. Coming out of COVID with like books and babies, I feel like a completely different person. But yeah, thank you so much, Sue. And thank you to everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it and got some ideas and maybe like me, you feel inspired to write more books like Sue, and hopefully in a few years I'll be able to say, yes, I've written 6 books as well, just like that. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sue, and I will hopefully see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.